Good morning, good morning, good morning. How's everybody doing today? Welcome back to class. I see we've got our typical regulars in the house today. Everybody chat up. Let me know who's in the house here. Uh-oh. So I would assume I got Renee Young here. Hello. Donnie Hahn, you here as well. I'll bet we probably have KB Hoyle in the house. Who else we got here? Madison G, are you here? Let's hope you're here as well. Good morning, Donnie. Good morning, KB. Good morning, everybody. All right, fantastic. So now that we've checked in, let's go ahead and get started today. So today we're going to finish up chapter 7 on cognitive psychology. If you remember yesterday, we spent some time talking about the cognitive perspective, this information approach to studying human functioning that was sort of modeled on the idea of the computer operating system. And we're interested in how people encode, store, and retrieve information. I introduced you this broad model of how the mind must work, the Atkinson and Shiffrin three-store memory model. And hopefully you kind of understood how information is processed as we take it in and think about the things that are presented to us, our sensory stimulations and all that. And then we talked about a couple of techniques that might help you to improve your memory, because we all want better memory. And remember, I suggested to you that memory is not something you're born with, it's a skill that you develop through conscious practice, okay? Good morning, Alex. Good to see you dropping in. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the different types of memories that there are, where they come from, and then we're going to talk about the other side of the coin, which is problems with memory and ways in which our memory isn't quite as good as a computer's. And this lecture is going to kind of go along with tomorrow's lab class, where we're going to be talking about the Ronald Cotton case, which is a case of incorrect eyewitness identification. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to talk about different types of memories in the brain, and we're going to talk about memory not being perfect. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's see. All right, now here's the deal. Way back when, people didn't realize that memories were different or stored differently. Remember how several weeks ago I told you about the modularity of function, and I suggested to you that there are spots on our brain that are responsible for specific abilities. Well, it turns out that there are different areas in our brain responsible for different types of memories. And as we've studied case studies of people with brain damage, we've come to understand that memory is a rather complex thing, and that different memories are stored in different places of the brain. So in the top right corner here, we're talking about the difference between what we call retrograde and anterograde amnesics. So we learned a lot about memory from studying different kinds of amnesics. So some people have a form of amnesia called retrograde amnesia. And what happens with those people is they can't remember things that occurred before the accident that damaged the brain. That's called retrograde amnesia. And then there are some people who, after an accident that damages their brain, they can remember all the stuff that happened before the accident, but they can't remember anything that came after the accident. And this is the idea behind HM. We looked at Clive Waring. These people who have damage to the hippocampus are going to have anterograde amnesia because they can't consolidate and reconsolidate new memories. And then we learned that the hippocampus is a place that processes new memories. Now, we found that the hippocampus is not where memories are stored, because these people with damage to the hippocampus still remember the things that happened before the accident. They didn't have retrograde amnesia, they just had anterograde amnesia. And then there are some people who have an accident or maybe lose part of their temporal lobe, and these people lose memories that they had before the accident or the surgery. But you'll notice that these people may still be able to form new memories. So we know that memories, images, ideas, concepts, feelings, emotions are stored in your temporal lobe. So as we learn about the different functions and different memory problems associated with damage to different areas of the brain, we can begin to build a rather complex model of how memories differentiate one from another. Okay, I see Amber Shepard's also dropped in. Good morning, Amber. Good to see you. Holy cow, we've got the whole gang here today. Well, we got 8 concurrent viewers. Thank you very much. I would call this a solid Thursday afternoon, Thursday morning lesson. Okay, so now your book's going to have an organizational chart in it, a learning tip, if you will, and I would like for you to be familiar with the different kinds of memories that we have identified and be able to associate them with the different parts of the brain. Okay, so when we talk about long-term storage, remember I told you that's the third box of the Atkinson and Shiffrin model of memory. That's the third memory store, and that's where things go while you are waiting to use them. It's a non-conscious area where memories are stored that can affect your behavior. And so let's talk about the different kinds of long-term memories. The first designation I want you to know is the difference between what we would call an explicit or a conscious memory and an implicit memory, a behavioral memory. The difference is an explicit memory is a memory that you have to bring up into your conscious awareness. Who was the first president of the United States? Where were you last night at 9 p.m.? These are all explicit memories because in order to use them, you have to bring them into your conscious awareness. You have to recall them into your short-term memory. We're going to differentiate all those memories with those memories that are what we call implicit. You may not have to think about them. You may not even know that that memory is being activated, and yet it still has an impact on your feelings or your behavior. And your book's going to talk about and so those are implicit memories. Now, let's step back and talk about your explicit memories. Turns out that there are different kinds of explicit memories. And we found that some people who suffer from amnesia lose what you might call episodic amnesia. They, in a sense, forget what happened to them over the last day, week. They may forget quite a different length of time. So you would say that these people have a form of amnesia, but these people who don't remember where they were, they still remember what a telephone is. You could still ask them who the President of the United States was. And so these people would have partial memory loss. So what's the difference here? Let's differentiate between what we would call episodic memories, which are memories that represent sensory experiences you actually had. So what happened at your 9th birthday party? Who was there? What games did you play? These are all what we would call episodic memories, right? And we're going to differentiate those from what we might call your common knowledge, your mathematical tables you have stored as rote memories. So if I say, what is 9 times 9? You immediately pop up the memory 81. That's what we would call a semantic memory, or a memory for facts and knowledge. Both of these are going to kind of be processed in and around the temporal lobes. The reason we differentiate between these two is because there are people who have amnesia who lose their episodic memory, but not their semantic memory. Okay? Now, those memories are located in your temporal lobe. Let's differentiate those from the 2 types of implicit memories that your book talks about. The first is classical conditioning, and the second is procedural memory. Now, if you think about it, in Pavlov's study, when the dog began salivating to the sound of the bell, that was a remembered response. Does that make sense? That's actually a memory because it's the dog's brain that makes it salivate to this environmental cue. That is a form of memory. And it's when you associate 2 stimuli together to elicit this response. And this is going to be controlled by your emotional center. Your amygdala is going to kind of be the place that they associate with classical conditioning. All right, and we're going to differentiate that from your procedural memories, which is any memory you have that allows you to engage in a behavior or a procedure. You've probably heard the word muscle memory before. That's exactly what I'm talking about. You may or may not realize it, but knowing how to dial a phone is a memory. It's a memory that's in your fingers, right? But it's a memory nonetheless. Riding a bike is a memory, right? And no matter how you approach it, you still have to learn and remember to put one foot before the other and move, right? Walking is a memory. Brushing your teeth is a memory, but we don't think about these things. We just have these memories. And motor skills and habits are often, these motor memories are typically localized to our cerebellum function. Now, here's the thing. You can forget episodes. You may even forget a semantic memory, but you know, it's hard to forget how to ride a bicycle. And I guarantee you, some of you probably have not gotten on a bicycle for 10, 50, 20 years, maybe even. Ken, how long has it been since you got on a bicycle? And yet, I'll bet you if you got on it, Ken, you would remember how to ride that bike just as well as you did the first day you got on it. I see Erica's shown up. Good morning, Erica. You know, yesterday's lecture was dedicated to you because we were talking about improved memory. I know you were at work and couldn't make it, but I was thinking about you the whole time I gave that lecture yesterday. All right, so for the exam, I want you to be familiar with these different types of memory stores, okay? Now, I then have... yesterday, we were talking about how to make your memory perfect. But you know what? I'll bet all of you know this, that our memories are not perfect at all. Less than 2 years, small kids help with procedural memory. Before that, a long time. Okay. So you have ridden a bike. But you know what? When you jumped on it 2 years ago, I'll bet you were surprised at how quickly you were back on that bike, right? So we were talking about how memories were perfect. You know what? It turns out that our memories are explicit memories. Explicit in the temporal lobe. Implicit memories are in the amygdala and the cerebellum. Ken, let's go back to that last chart. If you'll see right down here, I have it written at the bottom. Amygdala down here at the bottom and cerebellum under procedural. So for the test, that's probably what I'll try to do. Okay, so let's see, let's talk a little bit about memories. You know what, it turns out when it comes to explicit memories, none of us has a perfect memory. In fact, if you think about it, you need to forget so you can remember to pay attention to the stuff that is important. There are lots of things that happen in your day that you really don't need to remember, right? You don't need to remember what color shirt I was wearing or what color that car was that was in front of you at the stoplight. In fact, it's important that we don't remember everything. Now, famous. What's his name? Alexander Luria. He had a patient with perfect memory, with photographic memory, and the guy actually had trouble with daily tasks because the images and things that he remembered clouded up his mind. And this guy was a performer. He would go on stage and do incredible feats of memory every night. And he would do 2 shows. But the images from the first show would oftentimes mess up his ability to see images from the second show. So Alexander Luria reported this guy would actually, before the second show, between the first and the second show, he would close his eyes and he would imagine himself erasing his brain. And that was the only way he could erase the memories from the first show so that he could do his memory feats for the second show. You know what? It's important that you not remember everything. Now, let's think about memory. Why did memory evolve? Does anybody have an idea why memory evolved? Is memory really about the past? Does it have any survival value if it's only about what happened before? So what is memory important for? Memory is for the future, right? So your memory only has to be good enough to guide your behavior in the future. Hey, I ate that red berry and it made me puke for 2 days. Don't eat that again. Hey, I ate that animal over there and it tasted really good. So let's eat that animal over there. Really, your memory is only useful. It was designed for the future. Now, when you're trying to decide what food to eat or what thing to avoid, right? It's not important that your memory is perfect. So if you see a berry and it looks similar to the other berry and you don't have quite the perfect memory, as long as you can make guesses about what you should and shouldn't do, your memory is working well enough. So in a sense, your brain was designed to use imperfect memories. And in fact, what I like to think of it, especially when it comes to episodic memories, I would say that you remember basically the kernel of the memory. And then if you remember schemas from yesterday, you then add in the rest of the information to your memory based upon what you think should be there. So let me ask you a question. Do you remember your 8th birthday party? You might say yes, or 9th birthday party. And I would say, well, tell me all about that party. And you might say, well, there was a cake there was balloons there was presents there. You know what? Maybe you just remember the kernel of the memory, and all of these other details are just schema consistent things that should have been at a birthday party. Maybe we'll talk to your mom or dad and they'll say, wow, we didn't have the money for a birthday cake, so there was no birthday cake when you were 8 years old. But you'll say, man, I remember that. It turns out that memory is not perfect. In fact, it's quite malleable. And what I want you to know is that every time you bring a memory into conscious awareness for consolidation, you change that memory just a little bit. No memory is ever set in stone and stays the exact same, unless it's that one memory that all you do is think about it day in and day out and day in and day out. But most of the time, most every memory you have is distorted every time we bring it into our conscious awareness. So every time I think about my senior prom high school year, every time I bring that memory up, my girlfriend's dress changes just a little bit. The music we listen to changes just a little bit. What we ate changes just a little bit. That's the thing. Your memory wasn't designed to be perfect. It's designed to be a rough guide based upon what you experienced and also your knowledge about what you experienced, right? So you know what happened at your birthday party, which is an episodic memory, but you also have, you know what happens at birthday parties in general, which are semantic memories. When I ask you to tell me what happened, you're going to try to pull out the episodic associations, but you might get semantic associations as well. Does that make sense to everybody? I haven't bored you yet. Well, I probably have, but that's beside the point. Okay? Now, your book is going to then talk about some of the ways in which psychologists have discovered that people have memory problems. And so we're going to talk about some mostly episodic memory distortions. The first one your book talks about is memory bias. It turns out most people will change their memories to fit their current beliefs or attitudes. All right? So if, let's say, maybe you were relatively politically conservative as a teenager, and then you went to UNC Chapel Hill, a liberal bastion, and over 4 years, they changed your political affiliation and you suddenly became a very liberal person. Let's say you grew up and you were 30, 10 years later out of school. You might remember being a fairly liberal person in high school, even though you were actually a conservative person in high school. And so a lot of times what we'll do is we'll change our memories of past events to make it more consistent with our current beliefs and attitudes. So sometimes people change their memories in a sense to be consistent. Doesn't that make sense? Imagine if you had now turned and you were now politically conservative and you had to sit back and think about the times when you were very, very liberal, or the opposite way around. Or maybe you used to be very homophobic, but then you met some friends who were homosexual and changed your attitudes and realized the error of your ways. And then you might have to think back to how you were as a young child. It wouldn't be very comfortable to have those kinds of memories. So sometimes we just change our memories to make ourselves feel more consistent. Now, a second way in which memories become distorted, your book's going to talk about source misattribution. Here's an interesting concept. Every memory that you had, right, is only, it's the same thing as a memory that you were told about. The only difference is that you were in one of those memories. So I could tell you about my birthday. I could tell you about a birthday party, and it would be the same as your birthday party. And both of those, you're going to store those the same way. The only difference between my birthday party and your birthday party is your memory is going to include you as being part of it. But the crazy thing is, sometimes people who hear stories from other people accidentally think that they experience the event as well. And this is known as misattributing the source of the memory, or source misattribution. Now, in my developmental psychology class, I always tell my students that you do not have the myelination in your temporal and lobes and amygdala before the age of 3 to even store a memory. So we typically call this thing infantile amnesia. Nobody remembers the first 3 years of your life. And as soon as I say that, I always have somebody in class that raises their hand and says, wait a minute, I clearly remember when I was 18 months old, I fell in the snow and got snow on my face, and all my family laughed at me. I swear to God, Chris, I remember that memory. And they're actually wrong. Here's what happened. That happened when they were 18 months old, but they forgot it because they don't have the brain power. But at their 3rd birthday party, their parents tell this funny story about what happened to little Chris when he was 18 months old. And then at your 5th birthday party, they talk about that funny little story that happened to Chris when he was 18 months old. And then when I'm 8, it snows again, and we talk about that funny little story that happened when Chris was 18. And if I hear that story often enough, after a while, I will accidentally put myself as a recording agent in that memory. I, in a sense, will walk in and steal that memory. I don't know if you've ever had the experience of telling somebody about an event that you experienced and then hearing that person tell the same story to another person maybe days or weeks later as if they had had that experience. That's what we call source misattribution. So your episodic memories contain components just like a schema. And you being there is just one part of that memory. And you can actually mix that part up and walk into memories that really aren't yours. Does that make sense? We call that source misattribution. Now, tomorrow, or tonight, when you're watching the Picking Cotton 60 Minutes video, they're going to be talking to a lady named Elizabeth Loftus, Dr. Elizabeth Loftus. And I think she's at Harvard, and she is super duper famous with regard to distorted memories. And she has shown 2 things. She's shown that memories are very suggestible and very flexible, and you can easily change them if you ask the right kinds of questions. And she even discovered that it's possible to put completely false memories into a person's brain. So let's talk about her 2 studies. She found that a lot of times, depending upon how you ask the question, you will activate different schemas which lead to different memories. So let's think about this two words, bumped and smashed. Those are two concepts, and each one of those concepts has a schema about it. So smashed, I think of airplanes, I think of home runs, I think of glasses, I think of all these things you can smash, right? And when I think of the word bump, I think of oops, excuse me, oops, accident, oops, very easy, right? I don't think of that as being a very active word. And so what Elizabeth Loftus did, she would bring people in and have them watch a videotape of a small fender bender, right? She would then send them home for 3 days and bring them back into the laboratory and ask them questions. In her experiment, the independent variable was the type of verb that she used in the question. For half of the people, she said, "Did you see broken glass when the cars bumped into one another?" And then for the other half of the independent variable, she said, "Did you see broken glass when the cars smashed into one another?" And you know what she found? The estimates of speed were faster for those that were asked if they, or that the people who were asked the question with the word smashed in it were more likely to have seen broken glass than the people who were asked the question that included the word bumped. Pretty interesting, right? She would also ask how fast were the cars going, and she found that the cars were estimated to be going faster if the word was smashed than if the word was bumped. And so, in a sense, what she showed is what every defense attorney knows. Depending upon how you ask the question, people will reconsolidate their memory differently. Does that make sense? So you remember that you saw a car accident yesterday, and I told you every time you bring a memory into your conscious awareness to consolidate it, you change it a little bit. So what I did was I had you bring your memory into conscious awareness, but I gave you a hint. I used the word bump, or I used the word smashed, and that hint caused you to change your memory in a systematic way. Does that make sense? Now, to go even farther, Elizabeth Loftus showed that you can even create completely false memories in people's brains. And she did this with what they call the Lost in the Mall study. So she recruited people for her memory study, and then she contacted their parents and asked them for stories of their childhood. And for each participant, she got a couple of stories that really happened in their childhood. And so what she would do is she would bring the people in and ask them about the first memory. Do you remember when this happened? And they would go through the memory, and the people would say, yeah, I remember when that happened. I remember when that happened. She would then take them to the second childhood memory. Hey, and how about when this happened? Do you remember this and this and this? And she would describe it in detail. And the people would say, yeah, I remember that. She would then give them a third memory of something that had never, ever happened to them. She then said, hey, do you remember when you got lost in that mall? And she found that people would develop these crazy memories for things that never happened. How strangers had come up and helped them, and how they were crying, and their parents were so happy when they found them again. And these people would actually misremember getting lost in a mall, simply because she had primed them by asking them about two memories that they had really had. And so she found you could even implant a false memory in people's mind. You know what? She convinced people that they had met Bugs Bunny at Disney World. Can anybody tell me why that is impossible? I'll wait, see if anybody's a cartoon aficionado. Why would it be impossible for you to remember seeing Bugs Bunny at Disney World? And the answer is he is not a Disney character. Thank you very much, Donnie Hahn. Absolutely. You can't see Bugs Bunny or Wile E. Coyote or any of those people. Oh, until they bought the rights. Crap. This is an old study before that, KB. Haha. Okay? And so here's what she would do. She would send people a survey, and on the top of the survey, you know how they have the header? She had a header with all of the Disney characters in there, but she would sneak in the picture of Bugs Bunny. So imagine seeing Donald Duck, Daffy Duck, Goofy, and Bugs Bunny at the top of the header. And then she would ask them questions. Did you see Donald Duck while you were at Disney World? Yes or no? Did you see Daffy Duck while you were at Mickey Mouse at Disney World? Yes or no? And then she would include, did you see Bugs Bunny while you were at Disney World? And she found that a lot of people would actually remember seeing Bugs Bunny at Disney World. So what I want you to know is that although you can practice and learn to make your memory perfect, you can practice strategies. The strategies I suggested to you yesterday are really good for storing semantic knowledge perfectly and quickly, okay? But I want you to know that as a general rule, memory was not designed to record the past perfectly, but to guide us in the future. And I want you to know that our schemas, our beliefs, our expectations, and the way in which people pose questions or the environments in which they posed questions can really alter our memories and make them less than accurate. And in fact, in the study that you're going to watch, this is actually not a picture of Ronald Cotton, but look how these two fellows down here at the bottom right kind of look similar. They both have beards, they both have mustaches, prominent nose, their hair is a little bit the same. And so what happened in the Ronald Cotton case was the victim wrongly accused Ronald Cotton of the crime, and then Ronald Cotton became the guy she remembered. And even when she came face to face with the real rapist later, she had no emotional effect because she had changed her memory to have the wrong suspect in her memory. And she was so angry when she was faced with the real person because she thought Ronald Cotton was just trying to get out of his responsibilities as a criminal. And it's so weird how the dude that actually raped her, she changed the memory so that she had no emotional response to him. So I want you to know that memory is not perfect. Do you folks have any questions about this week's lecture? I just want you to know that there are different types of memories processed in the brain. We've learned them from case studies. We have explicit memories versus implicit memories. Explicit memories can be divided into semantic and episodic knowledge. The difference with explicit memories is they need to be recalled into consciousness to be useful. I suggested to you that implicit memories are different, that they don't need to be called into conscious awareness. And classical conditioning and procedural memory are two forms of implicit memories. And then, as I suggested to you, memory is not perfect. It can be distorted, and I'd like for you to be familiar with these several distortions that we talked about this week. All right, that's all I have to say this week. Any questions? I hope to see everybody at lab tomorrow morning at either 10 o'clock or 1 o'clock. And hopefully you'll have some good memory stories then. And we can share some interesting facts about our early childhood or something, right? Okay, fantastic. Have a great week. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Until then, take care.
Your call cannot be completed as dialed. Please consult your directory and call again, or ask your operator for assistance. This is a recording.